Hello, my friends. Welcome back to Storyline English. I'm really happy you're joining me for this one. Close your eyes and try to picture this. A land so old, so far away, that for thousands of years, almost no one in the world knew it existed. A place where the earth is red, the sky is wide, and the silence is so deep you can almost hear it. This is the story of Australia. Not the Australia you see in travel pictures, the real Australia, the ancient one, the one that holds secrets older than any book ever written. And somewhere in that silence, a people lived. They sang to the land. They listened to it. They called it home. But one day, something appeared on the horizon. Something no one had ever seen before. And nothing would ever be the same again. If this is your first time here, welcome to Storyline English. This is a place where every story is a journey, and every journey helps you learn. If you have been here before, I am so happy you came back. Before we begin, I want to ask you one small thing. Stay with me until the end, because this story, I promise you, is one you will not forget. And when it is finished, tell me in the comments, what surprised you the most? A very, very long time ago, before maps, before ships, before the word Australia ever existed, there was a land at the bottom of the world. It was surrounded by ocean on every side. It was alone, and it was alive. The people who lived there did not call it Australia. They did not need a name for it. To them, it was simply the world. It was everything. These people are called the Aboriginal people, and their story is one of the oldest stories on Earth. Scientists today believe that the Aboriginal people arrived in Australia more than 60,000 years ago. That number is almost impossible to imagine. To help you understand, the Great Pyramids of Egypt were built about 4,500 years ago. The Aboriginal people were already living in Australia for more than 50,000 years before that. They did not build pyramids. They did not need to. Their connection to the land was their monument. They had a deep and beautiful way of understanding the world. They called it the Dreamtime. The Dreamtime was not a dream you have when you sleep. It was something much bigger. It was their explanation of how the world was created. In the Dreamtime, great spirit beings walked across the land. They sang as they walked, and where they walked and sang, the rivers formed, the mountains rose, and the animals appeared. The land was not just dirt and rock to the Aboriginal people. It was sacred. Every hill, every river, every tree had a story. And that story was alive. It was their history, their religion, and their map, all at the same time. They passed these stories from parent to child, from elder to young person, through song, through dance, and through art. For thousands of years, this is how Australia lived. Quietly, slowly, in balance. But far away, across the ocean, another world was beginning to move. And it was moving toward them. For thousands of years, the Aboriginal people lived in deep harmony with their land. They knew every plant. They knew every animal. They knew when the rains would come and when the dry season would begin. They did not have supermarkets or cities, but they had everything they needed. Different groups of Aboriginal people lived in different parts of Australia. Some near the ocean, eating fish. Some in the desert, finding water in places no one else could find. Some in green forests in the south. Each group had its own language, its own stories, its own songs. There were hundreds of different languages across the continent. This was not one simple people. This was a rich and complex world. Life was not always easy. The Australian land is one of the harshest places on Earth. The desert is enormous, the heat can be extreme, and water is sometimes very hard to find. But the Aboriginal people had learned, over thousands of years, how to live in this land. They learned which plants were safe to eat and which were dangerous. They learned how to find water underground. They learned how to use fire carefully to help the land grow better, a practice called fire stick farming, which scientists today still study and admire. They moved with the seasons. They took only what they needed. They lived lightly on the earth, and the earth gave back to them. Children grew up learning the songs of their ancestors. The songs were not just beautiful, they were maps. They described the landscape in detail. A young person who learned the songs of their people could travel across hundreds of kilometers of desert and always know where they were. The land spoke to them, and they listened. This was their world, whole, complete, ancient. And for a very long time, it seemed like nothing would ever change it. But the world outside Australia was changing. In Europe, people were curious. They wanted to know what was beyond the ocean. They built bigger and stronger ships, made better maps, and sailed further and further from home. Some were looking for gold. Some were looking for new lands to claim. And some were simply looking for what was there, beyond the edge of the known world. For many years, European sailors heard stories of a great southern land. They called it Terra Australis Incognita, the unknown southern land. It was a mystery, a question without an answer. In 1606, a Dutch explorer named Willem Janszoon sailed his small ship along the northern coast of Australia. He was the first European to make contact with Australian land and its people. But he did not know what he had found. He left, and the mystery continued. Over the next century and a half, more European sailors arrived. Portuguese, Spanish, and Dutch ships all passed near the Australian coast. Some landed briefly, some made maps, but none of them stayed. The land seemed too harsh, too dry, too far away. It was red and strange and silent, and so they left. But the visits continued, and slowly, the edges of the great southern land began to appear on European maps. Still, no one truly understood what they had found. No one understood the people who already lived there. No one stopped to listen. Then, in 1770, a man named James Cook arrived, and everything changed. James Cook was a British explorer and a careful man. He was skilled at reading the ocean and the stars, and he was sent by the British government to sail to the Southern Ocean, to observe the planet Venus from the island of Tahiti, and then to search for the great southern land. He sailed on a ship called the Endeavour, with scientists, artists, and sailors ready to discover something new. In April 1770, Cook and his crew sailed along the eastern coast of Australia. They saw green land, beautiful bays, and strange animals they had never seen before. They stopped at a place Cook would later name Botany Bay, near what is today the city of Sydney. When the Endeavour arrived, the Aboriginal people who lived there watched from the shore. Some approached in small boats. They were moments of confusion, moments of fear, and also, at first, moments of simple watching and waiting. Two worlds stood at the edge of each other, neither fully understanding the other. Cook made notes in his journal. He wrote that the Aboriginal people seemed healthy and free, that they did not seem to want the things the Europeans had brought. He even wrote, thoughtfully, that in one sense, the Aboriginal people were happier than Europeans because they lived in a world that provided everything they needed. But his report back to Britain described the land as suitable for settlement, and those words would change everything. In 1788, 18 years after Cook's visit, a fleet of 11 British ships arrived in Australia. They carried over 1,000 people, soldiers, officials, and 750 convicts, people who had been sent away from Britain as punishment for crimes, many of them small. This was the beginning of the British colony. And for the Aboriginal people, it was the beginning of something very hard to describe. It was the beginning of a loss they had never imagined possible. The British settled at a place they called Sydney Cove. They raised a flag. They claimed the land. But the land already had people, and those people had never agreed to give it away. At first, there were moments of careful contact between the settlers and the Aboriginal people. Some Aboriginal leaders tried to understand the newcomers, tried to communicate. One man, named Bennelong, learned English and even traveled to Britain with Governor Arthur Phillip. He tried to be a bridge between two worlds. But the worlds were too different, and the pressure on the Aboriginal people grew stronger every year. The settlers needed land to farm. They moved further and further from Sydney, and as they moved, they took land that had belonged to Aboriginal families for thousands of years. The Aboriginal people resisted. There were conflicts. There was violence on both sides. But the settlers had guns, and the Aboriginal people did not. And then came something even more invisible and more deadly than guns: disease. The Aboriginal people had never been exposed to European illnesses. Smallpox, influenza, and other diseases spread quickly. Within years of the British arrival, a devastating number of Aboriginal people died. Some communities lost more than half their people. The songs were interrupted. The stories were broken. The connection between the people and their land was stretched and torn in ways that no one had fully prepared for. It is one of the most painful chapters in the long story of Australia, and it is important to remember it. Not with anger, but with honesty. Because understanding the past is part of understanding the present. Australia today is a modern country. It has big cities, beautiful beaches, and people from all over the world. But underneath all of that, the ancient story is still there. The Aboriginal people are still there. They have survived through everything. Through loss and change and pain, they have held on to something. Their songs, their stories, their connection to the land. Today, there is growing recognition of Aboriginal culture in Australia. Their art is known around the world. Their knowledge of the land is studied and respected by scientists. Their languages, many of which almost disappeared, are being carefully learned and taught again. The journey is not finished. There is still much work to do. But the story continues. And that is, perhaps, the most important thing to understand. A story that survives is a story that still has something to say. And this story has said something to us today. It has told us that every land has a voice, that every people has wisdom, and that listening, really listening, is one of the most important things a human being can do. As an English learner, you are already practicing that. You are listening. You are learning. You are on your own journey of discovery. And that is something to be proud of. Thank you for staying with me today. If this story moved you in any way, please leave a comment below. Tell me what you felt. Tell me what surprised you. And if you want to continue your journey with Storyline English, the next story is already waiting for you. I will see you there.